Howdy, Fi Guys. Welcome back to the Fi Guys podcast. In today's episode, we are going to be talking a little bit about real estate in regards to house hacking, subject to investing, and creative financing. Yeah, you might know a little bit about the FHA loans and hard money lenders, all that fun stuff. It's pretty common these days. But today we're going to be showing you how you can kind of get into a house for little money down. I wouldn't say no money down. I'm not going to lie to you here. We're going to need some money down for this tactic. But today we're going to be talking a little bit about as regards to not just real estate investing, but also, buying a home for yourself. So with that being said, thanks for coming along and let's get right into the pod. Alrighty, guys, and we're back. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're going to be flipping the script just a little bit, just a small little bit. Normally Chris is the sensei, the master, the Qui-Gon Jinn to my Obi-Wan. But today we're flipping the script a little bit, and I will be running today's podcast since today's topic is really near and dear to my heart. I do love real estate. I love investing in real estate. I love all about that. I love learning about it. It's one of my favorite topics in regards to finance. Chris will be the student today. I guess I'll be the master. Hopefully, if I'm Qui-Gon, I don't get cut in half. If you know the reference, we love you for it. If not, that's okay. We won't judge. First off, Chris, how was your week been? You've been how was your weekend? How was your weekend?
Weekend was great. Yeah, I went to jiu-jitsu over the weekend, hung out with some friends. We went swimming. I was teaching a friend of mine how to swim, so he's getting much better at it.
Heck yeah.
So really excited. But most importantly, I'm excited to learn from you today. I'm excited to not have to think, just to be able to sit here and you be my sensei, and I'm here.
Perfect. I love, yeah, I mean, who better to teach swimming than literally a lifeguard? So, I mean, it's perfect. So, yeah, we're going to be going over 3 main segments for today's podcast. 1 will be house hacking, 2 will be subject to investing or sub 2, and 3 will be creative financing. Some stuff you may or may not have heard about. Probably you've heard about house hacking if you're clicking on this podcast. But yeah, we're gonna go over all of it today. So yeah, let's get right into it. So just to start off, Chris, what is your knowledge of house hacking? I know we've talked about it on the pod before. Do you need any definition of that, or should we give the viewers straight from?
No, I mean, I guess my definition of house hacking, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, it's basically where you try to purchase a house that's larger than what you actually need to live in, and then you try to maybe get other tenants or families or something like that to live inside the other domiciles, whether that be rooms or separated parts of the home through walls, and then they help to maybe lower your mortgage cost by paying you rents. Is that
Absolutely.
how that works?
That's exactly how it works. And oftentimes people associate house hacking with, I have to make it so I don't pay anything. And no, that's not it at all. It can be that, but it also can be owning a property at a reduced cost. I know a lot of people will rent out. I heard this one thing. I got to tell you this. This is the funniest thing. So boyfriend and girlfriend are living together in an apartment, right? And obviously the girlfriend moves in and he's like, I need your half of the rent, right? It was like, I don't know, $600, whatever. And come to find out years later, he owns the apartment and he was just like living for free. Like it was just like, he owned it outright, like no mortgage, no loan, no anything, but she was still charging her rent. And I just think that's the funniest thing. It's kind of like a little bit of a sweaty thing to do to a girlfriend, but
I think that's totally fine because she's living. I have a friend actually. This is a friend of a friend, but there's a guy and he owns a house and his girlfriend moved in with him, and he was saying like, "Hey, I'd like you to pay like part of the mortgage, or like you pay me basically rent." And she's like, "I'm not going to pay your mortgage. Like, why should I have to pay for a man's mortgage?" And we're all sitting there like watching, talking to him. We're like, so she basically just wants to live for free, and since it's your house, it's on you. Like if you guys got married, then she'd own half the equity in the house, but she's not thinking that far ahead. So people are silly when it comes to that kind of stuff, especially when it comes to housing. People lose their minds.
Yeah, they really do. So yeah, so the definition of it would basically be, like Chris and I have been talking about, is where you either rent out part of the house, a few rooms, maybe you have an extension to where, you have a house in the backyard, like a little bungalow where you stay and the renters stay in the main house, and it offsets your costs or completely wipes out your costs, which is great because you're building in equity, which is really nice. You're paying it off and you're not even paying it off really. The quote unquote tenant or your friends or your family would be paying it off. So we love that. And you can do it with like a single family home. Obviously, like you need an extra room, right? So here in my house, I have a 2-bedroom, 2 bath. It would be a little bit more difficult because I have my office in here. But if I move my office to my bedroom, which I wouldn't recommend, bad for sleep, but you could, I could rent out this room to a buddy of mine and then I could charge them $500, $600, for the room. And you might say, Dom, that's super expensive. It's like, it all depends, right? So that could be definitely a way I could house hack. And maybe you can figure out a way that you can house hack as well, or house hack down the line. Because it doesn't have to just be a single family home like what I live in. It can also be a multifamily home, right? It could be a duplex. It could be a triplex. It could be a fourplex. I find.
Could you explain what that means? Like, what do you mean by multi? Or like, does that mean like we're having an apartment, or what does that mean?
So technically, multifamily is everything above a fourplex in the eyes of the loan officers, right? But you can get an FHA loan on a single family home, obviously, a duplex, triplex, and a fourplex. So basically, we'll go with a fourplex, right? A fourplex is one building that has four separate entrances, four separate kitchens, four separate bathrooms, four separate homes within the building. And it's just considered one building, but it's a fourplex, right? So what a lot of people do is they'll get an FHA loan, they'll put 3.5% down, they'll live in one unit, and they'll rent out the three other units, right? That way, it's not like they're in your house, they're separate units, right? And the FHA allows you to use that style of loan to get into a property like that, a fourplex. Fourplexes are really great. We love, but they can be very, very expensive, right? Because you're buying essentially four places to live rather than just one. But yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do it really is single family home, renting it out to a friend or someone from work, possibly. There's I'm not going to say that it's like the easiest thing in the world because there's definitely challenges when renting to a friend or family. I'm being honest, I don't like to do it. I don't like to mix business and family or business and friends usually. It can sour things. But if you have strong boundaries and you have good systems in place, it can work. It can work very well. I know a lot of people do it in college where, they'll rent a house from a guy and they'll use their credibility and, I'll be managing the house. I'll be looking over. It's my house. And then, people they're going to school with, hey, if you need a room, I got a room, right? It's not for free. You have to pay your own way, but it's definitely a way to do it. You have any questions, Chris?
No, I mean, that sounds good. Actually, that's something that I did in college, and it really worked out well for me. I didn't own the house, but it was a property that I got to know the landlord. And basically, I paid the landlord from a check, and then my own check, and then all the tenants or my roommates would pay me, and then I do that. So it works out really well. So you actually don't even need to own the property. In truth, you can actually be a renter and then sublet your
Yeah.
renting. And of course, you need to look from your state to state, and also your negotiation with your landlord. If you're renting a house, just don't go and start subletting things without knowledge from the landlord that that's okay to do.
Correct. Yeah, you don't want to get a great deal on a property, say $1,000 a month, and then go sublet the whole house for $1,500 a month. Like they probably will not like that, right? It's probably you may want to check with them, right? I definitely wouldn't recommend doing that. It's best if you're in the property as well for this form of house hacking. But yeah, so getting on to segment 2. You're good with house hacking? That's kind of the basics of house hacking. It's really simple.
Yeah, I mean, would you recommend if I wanted to get into house hacking? I don't like people in my space. Like I
Yeah.
very like type A, everything has its own place. So would you recommend that I probably get like a duplex or a triplex? That way at least I can have that separation of a wall
Yeah.
between me and them.
100%. 100,000,000%. Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm very picky about who comes in my space. I've spent a lot of time curating my gear and my stuff, and I'm like, I don't want people to just be like in here without me. It makes me feel really uncomfortable, and I don't like people like throwing house parties and what you know me. So yeah, I would definitely recommend a duplex. If you're starting out and you don't really like other people in your house.
Well, I know there's also a bunch of states like California recently did this, and I believe Denver or Colorado is doing this, where they're going to allow pretty much any single properties to do ADUs. So would it be possible to maybe create a wall in my single family home and then turn that into its own separate thing? And if so, what actually makes it its own little house? Like, does it just need a bathroom? Does it need a kitchen? Does it need a washroom? Like, what do we need for me to call it its own quote unquote property?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to check with like your city, your state, all of that because it varies. It varies so heavily. And even varies by even if your state allows it, the HOA might not allow it as well. So you don't want to put a whole nother unit even in the backyard. So you get a nice big backyard, you put a whole another unit back there, and the HOA is like, you can't do that. That's against our bylaws. So the HOA does have power to deny stuff like that. But to my knowledge, you have to have a bedroom, you have to have a bathroom, you know, all of the power, anything a regular home would have has to be in it, right?
So is it bedroom, bathroom, kitchen,
I would
or
think so. Yes. Yeah.
okay?
To my knowledge, yeah. Yeah, to my knowledge, it is. But again, that can get costly if you're building like a separate unit. I'm not saying it. People don't do it. A lot of investors. This one investor I follow quite heavily on social media. His name's Thatch. He's in Seattle. He does that all the time, where he'll buy a property, big backyard, and we'll put the ADU in the back, right? And it's nice because a lot of times in Seattle area and like the whole Washington State area, they have alleys behind the you know the homes, right? So it's another access point. So you can, so he'll put a full garage in there too. So it'll be a home, a garage, and everything. So you can, rather than like parking your car out front or somewhere else, you can actually pull it into the property from the back, which is super brilliant and a great way to not only like increase the property's like potential to make more money and house hack and everything, but it increases the whole value of the entire lot, basically.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
'cause
it's
now you have
definitely
two properties on there rather than one, huh?
exactly. And if your city is like a destination city, maybe you'd want to do like an Airbnb in the back instead. I know a lot of people do that, which isn't a bad idea, at all. So yeah, I definitely love this version of house hacking. I'd say it's probably the least scary one on today's list, unfortunately.
Okay.
The other ones take a bit of guts, take a bit of negotiating if you're not into that, and just, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll get to the end of the podcast and be like, no, Dom, actually, like, creative financing is way better for me. I like that so much better. But yeah, let's get on to segment two. Segment two, subject to. That's what segment two is. Yeah, I was like, should I go with subject to or segment two? They're both exactly the same thing. So I'm like, it's gonna throw me off a little bit. But yeah, let me give you a little definition on all of that. So subject to is an investing method where you take over the existing mortgage of a property while keeping the original owner's name. This can be a powerful way to acquire properties with little to no money down. So this one is becoming a lot more popular in today's society. As you may or may not know, interest rates are very, very high to buy a home. It's very expensive to buy a home. But a lot of people who have homes bought homes when interest rates were much, much less, right? Or even if you didn't get an interest rate that was less, you could have refinanced it during like the pandemic and got it down to like a 2 or 3%, right? So those are just like, those are the best you can get, the 2 to 3% loans, right? You can have an 850. Chris himself could go and get a loan today. He's not getting 3%.
No.
The president isn't getting 3%, 4%. You know, he's going to get closer to 5, 6, 7%, right? It's going to be a lot higher. And over 30 years of a mortgage, I mean, we're not talking about pennies here. We're talking about tens of thousands, possibly even hundreds of thousands in the long runs, just in interest payments. So it's definitely a great way to get around that. But yeah, let me continue explaining it. So how it works is basically you take control of the property by taking over the mortgage payments, right? The owner stays as the owner of the home, but you're just taking over payments, and you write up a contract and everything. And in the mortgage, it says like the seller's name, but you get the deed and the ownership, right? It's kind of interesting, right? So the mortgage is still in their name because that's what they got it with the bank, right? But the deed is who owns the mortgage. So you're taking control of the deed and the ownership, but the mortgage will stay in place. I hope that's not too confusing. Do you have any questions about that?
No, I guess that does make sense. My only concern would be, is there risk to the original owner if you were to default since their name is still on the mortgage?
Yeah, so basically this is very uncommon, right? It's for people who own homes, they've never heard about this. They don't do this a lot, right? They probably bought their home traditionally. They had a realtor and they bought it and they got a hard money loan from the bank, Bank of America or wherever, for X amount down, X amount percentage for X amount of years, right? So they're like, this is the traditional way. This is the only way to buy homes. But unfortunately, homes are so expensive these days that we got to find creative ways to kind of get around that. So what you do is you end up building a contract, and a lot of states will require you to do this with a lawyer sometimes. So you'll build a contract to where, say, if I miss a few payments, like if I miss 4 payments in a row, right, the house goes back to them, right?
Oh, okay. So that's what protects them.
It protects them. It protects them, and it's like, oh, I better not miss my payments, right? So the benefit of this is definitely like low upfront costs, because you're just taking over their mortgage. And you might be wondering, well, Dom, like, why would anybody let me take over their mortgage? I'm basically getting a house for free. Like, when do I pay them? When do I get a loan? Like, if a guy's selling a home for $200,000 and I'm just like, hey, can I take over your mortgage? He just says yes. No. So here's how it works. So basically, there's an app, there's a website called PropStream. This is what I use to do this, right? PropStream lets you look up addresses and lets you see what loans are on the property, right? You don't want an adjustable, you want a fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. Adjustable, the rate goes up and down. Fixed, stuck in place. So you're probably wondering, like, why would anybody just let me take over their loan? They're not an idiot. They're not going to just let me take it. Totally agree. People are not as stupid as they sometimes seem. But sometimes people need to sell their homes, but they're going to lose money on the sale. Let me give you an example. So say I have a $200,000 home, right? I bought it a couple years back. I've only paid $10,000 on it. So I still owe $190,000 on the home, right? And let's just say I have exigent circumstances. I family back east, they're having financial troubles. Family passed away. I want to sell my house. I want to go be with family. I'm tired of this. But if I sell my house, we're talking about 3, 4, 5% commission on the house from the realtor. So right there, what are we talking? 10,000. Closing cost fees, inspection fees, bunch of different fees, taxes, all this crazy stuff. So even though I have $10,000 worth of equity, that's going to get completely eaten up by taxes, fees, all that nasty stuff, right? Mm-hmm. That's where someone who wants to do a subject to deal comes into play. Now, granted, subject to is not appetizing to the buyer. If I'm a buyer, I just want a lump sum of cash. I don't want all this stuff.
Do you mean the seller? Do you mean the seller there?
Yes. Yeah. If I'm the seller, thank you. If I'm the seller, I want a lump sum of cash. I want to pay off my loan and I want to be done with it. I totally get that. Everybody would. But here's where it can benefit you, right? So rather than him losing money, what I've seen as a common tactic in this situation is you would offer a higher down payment, right? So where does the down payment go? Does it go to the mortgage? Where does it go? It goes right into the seller's pocket. Say, okay, $200,000 home. I got $10,000 worth of equity. I'm going to lose money if I sell this house. Would you be willing to take over payment? I would be willing to take over payment. But to sweeten the deal, because oftentimes they don't want to do this, the buyer or the seller, they don't even know that this is an option, right? Mm-hmm. They just know that they're going to lose money on this deal. Unfortunately, it takes some convincing oftentimes because it's new. Everybody is very abrasive when it comes to things that are quite new. So what you're probably going to have to do is put a larger down payment than you would normally do in order to kind of convince them, right? But you got to lay out the terms. Well, guess what? If you sell your house, you're going to lose $5,000 on the house easily, right? How about this? Rather than you losing $5,000, how about I give you $10,000 and I take over your mortgage? We don't have to do any of the, I'll pay the seller's realtor. I'll pay that, and I'll pay the taxes and I'll pay the fee. You walk away with $10,000 and I get a mortgage for the $200,000 or the $190,000. I just take over your $190,000 mortgage, right? Now you're probably thinking, Dom, why don't I just get this is too much work. This is like, I can just get a loan for 190 and he can screw off. He can lose money. It's like, no, 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 no. The money is made in the purchase, not the sell, right? So as an investor, as someone who wants to start house hacking, as someone who wants to start, buying a house, this doesn't even have to be for investing. This can be for your personal home. The difference between 3% and 7%, and Chris, you could probably talk to this, is massive. Could you speak on that for real quick, Chris? In
Yeah, of
regards to
course.
like the interest? Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of interest, like it doesn't sound like a lot, grant you. 4% to 7%, we're only talking about 3%. But whenever I try to think about what that means, is let's think of the rule of 72. So if we take the rule of 72 when we have a 7% interest, and let's say we're not making payments for whatever reason, that means that our principal payment is going to double every 10.2 years. 72 divided by 7, 10.2. Versus when it's 4 divided by 72. I don't want to do quick math on the podcast, but let's say it's, I don't know, 16, I think, 16 or 18.
Mhm.
So it's going to double every 16 or 18 years rather than every 10 years. So you can see just those 3 percentage points compounded over enough years makes a big thing. And most mortgages are on a 30-year basis. So over 30 years, 3%, while not doesn't sound big right now, 3% over 30 years compounded every single year makes a huge amount of money. It could be tens of thousands to, depending on the property, hundreds of thousands of dollars if the property is worth millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. I'm going to pull up a little mortgage calculator. I'm not going to share my screen, but I'm going to pull it up and I'm going to see if we can, let's see. We should have done this down the line, but I mean, yeah, the difference, like you said, is crazy. Doubling for 30 years, right? Every 10 years. So it's going to double that $190,000 or $200,000 loan. Just make it simple. 200,000, 400,000, 600,000. I'm going to end up paying like $600,000 in interest, like crazy amounts. And I don't know if those numbers are 100% accurate. I'm just doing quick math, but based on the rule of 72, you're going to be paying a lot more in interest if you just went out and bought a house the traditional way. That's kind of the reason behind the subject to movement, and getting homes for that legendary interest rate of 3%. I've seen stuff as low as 2.9%. I've seen it. But hard to come by. But yeah, do you have any?
So,
Yeah, go for it.
let me ask, how are you finding these deals? I can't imagine you're walking from people's house to house and knocking and saying like, do you want to get out of your house today? Like it would sound like you're a crazy door-to-door salesman
Yeah.
and getting the door slammed in your face. So is there like a website or an app or something like that people are going to try to source these deals where both buyers and sellers can come together and try to figure something out that might work for them? Especially if most sellers are unaware that this is even an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say the best way to do it is to work with the realtors, right? The realtors and your connections are going to be your golden goose. So it's as simple as calling up a house, and no different than how you would do on any normal house, right? You call them up and be like, "Hey, I love this house on 1600 Cherry Street Avenue. Would you like what? Why are they selling?" And I love asking why they're selling because that is super important, right? It's super super important because you want a motivated seller. A motivated seller beats the brakes off everyone, and that's kind of like someone who's not very. It's like a nonchalant person selling. It's like, I'll sell it when I sell it, versus like, no, I have to sell it. I'd like to get this done quickly. Like, let's move. So we definitely love the motivated seller, but it's as easy as calling up the realtor and be like, hey, I was wondering, I love this house. Would your client be open to like subject to? Would they be open to that? And I say, well, let me talk with the client, right, the seller, and we'll see. We'll check it out and see if they'd be interested. Would you like to put an offer? I'm like, yeah, I'll put in an offer. I'll put 10,000, 20,000 down or whatever, and just take over their mortgage, and I'll take care of the realtor fees and all that stuff, and all that stuff. Yeah. So it's as simple as asking the realtor.
Okay.
And
And
I
do
know
most
it's like,
realtors know what subject to is? Because
yeah,
this is relatively new.
yeah. So they'll know. They'll know. They'll definitely know. They definitely should know. Every call I've had, they've known. I mean, it's like, it'd be like me asking, it's like, do you know who that Jerome Powell guy is? Chris, you know that guy? You've heard about this guy? It's like,
Yeah, that's kind of part of my job.
if you didn't know, I'd be like, what an idiot. What do you mean you don't know? Like, I'm not even in. What do you mean? It's their job to like know every aspect of it, of real estate. So yeah, they very much should know. If they don't, you might have to educate them. May have to educate them just a little bit. But thankfully, you'll have this podcast to reference, and there's a bunch of videos on subject to. It's going to be the next big. I truly believe it's going to be like the next big thing for real estate investing. And go for it.
I have another question. So once you pay off the mortgage goes away because now the mortgage is gone. So their name is drops off everything. You own the deed and you own the payments. So now is it just your house all in clear? And since that mortgage is now gone, their name is off the property entirely. Once that mortgage does get paid off.
Yeah, once their mortgage is paid off, because the mortgage and the deed are two separate things, right? So the deed is just who owns the mortgage, right? And the mortgage is who has the agreement with the bank. So basically, once the mortgage is paid off, the mortgage goes away, and you're just left with the deed, which you own. So yeah.
Okay.
Does that
So
make
the mortgage has nothing to do with the house. The mortgage only is an agreement between the lender, which would be the bank in that situation, and the individual who took out the loan. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That
And
makes sense.
and I want to be very clear. I think everybody should do their own research on this. It's very important that you do your own research. Some of the risks, I'm going to talk about that right now. Some of the risks are, because you're probably thinking this is too good to be true, right? Some of the risks are in certain scenarios, in certain times, this is rare, right? This might be 1 or 2% that it could happen, but it has happened. So I should share it, right? There's a due on sale clause with the bank. You're talking, what is that? So what that basically means is when the house is sold, the bank comes to you and be like, I want the full amount of money. I want the whole loan right now. You have 1 month to come up with it, right? That's a very scary thing, right? Because we don't have the money. We don't have the 190,000. I'm not sitting 190,000 liquid, right? Nor would I want
And
to
if
just
we
park.
did, then we would
Yeah.
probably just purchase the house and would not need this at all.
Yeah. So how do we get around that? So what
Do they all have that clause in that? Do all mortgages have that clause, or some, or is it? Do you know what that is?
I don't know the percentage of them, but some banks are more finicky than others. They don't like it, but really, there's no
Is it because the
conversation.
bank doesn't want to? Is it because the bank doesn't want to take on the risk of some random person coming in and saying like, I know that you approved this person,
Yeah.
but here I am now.
Yeah. Well, so who's making money in the deal, right? I'm making money because I'm not spending as much money on interest. The person selling the home is making money because, well, they're actually going to make money and they're not going to lose money on the house, right? Who's not making money on the house? The bank, right? So they don't like it. They want you to be like, they want their money, right? They want to be greedy. They say, no, we're canceling this loan. Come get another loan with us at 7%. We'll do you one for 7 or 6%. It's like, no, the whole reason I'm trying to avoid this, right? One way I've seen people get around this is they'll buy the deed to the home with a trust. And I'm still not 100% on it. I must be honest. I'm still new to the buying things in a trust. So, and I know Chris is like, he's a genius when it comes to trust, or smarter than me at least. So they can't call a due on sale clause for a trust, which is weird. There was a court case where it was overruled where the bank tried to, due on sale clause in a trust. I think it was the Supreme Court. They were like, no, you can't call a due on sale clause for a trust because it's no different than if, I own a home, I'm paying the mortgage and I die, but I sell the house, I sell the deed to my trust. So it's like, well, there's nothing sketchy going on here. It's just the bank being greedy. We have the law on our side with that. I would definitely consult with someone who sets up living trusts and stuff like that to be like 100% sure and do your own research. I definitely recommend like Pace Morby. He's got a great YouTube channel talking all about this. PACE Morby, MORBYE, I believe it is. Yeah, very interesting guy, very interesting technique. But yeah, it definitely.
So do you think for the contract, are you going to have to get an attorney for this? Because this sounds like something that like I would like protect both myself as the buyer, and I'm sure the seller is going to be like, I want to make sure that we don't end up in any litigation. So how much money do you think you're going to be paying just in lawyer fees to get all this stuff processed before we even are able to put down the down payment to buy that house?
You'll save more in the long run. I'll say that much. Obviously, right? With the 4% difference in interest rate, you're still coming out so much ahead. Like the number is crazy, right? If you feel more comfortable getting a lawyer and doing it that way, totally agree. I personally probably would. Because I like to have all my I's dotted and T's crossed. This isn't my arena, the legal side, right? I want someone who that is their arena. to handle it, right? Oftentimes you'll have the realtor write up the contract, or you can bring a contract. But yeah, I would definitely have a contract written and then run it by a lawyer and see what they think about it, make sure it's all airtight, and then send it over. That's how I would probably run it.
Interesting. So then at that point, the person, they move their stuff out, you move in, they still have the mortgage in their name, but you have the deed. And what else do you have? You have the deed and something else you said?
So you'll have the deed and you'll have ownership of it, right? So the ownership will be of the mortgage, right? So the mortgage is obviously who pays, and we own the deed, right? So
And then for the deed, you're just sending to the city recorder's office saying that now my name is on there, but according to the bank will not have my name on the mortgage. The bank will have the other person's name on the mortgage. Do you know how we go on paying that bank account now? Because are we just sending money to the original owner and they're paying it, or are we? Because now typically when you do that it's called a direct bank transfer, like an ACAT system.
Mhm.
You're trying to link them up. You're trying to direct a bank account to a mortgage. The mortgage and the bank account name still need to have the same names on there. I can't be John Smith and that's on my mortgage, and then I'm having, I don't know, Abigail Don Quixote freaking paying that off. It needs to be something else.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm still learning about. I'm not 100% sure, because I would think in my learning about it, it's you're paying the no, because okay, so sometimes you'll get confused with the next subject, which will be creative financing, and subject to. They're very, very similar, but they're different by like a little hair. So yeah, so basically you would be, let me think about this. I always forget it. Hold on. So you'd be taking over the existing mortgage. So you would be making the payments for the mortgage. I believe you'd be paying the seller, and the seller would be making the payments. I believe that's my knowledge of it. I could be mistaken. If so, I'll address it in Friday. But that is my knowledge. That is my knowledge of it.
Okay. So if that's the case, what I definitely recommend then is you definitely want an attorney involved, because if you're paying somebody else with the expectation that they're paying the mortgage, my concern if I was the buyer is that I'm sending the seller, hey, here's your money, use this money, and they're supposed to just take it from this hand, move it over to that hand, and send over. But what they could be doing is just taking it, pocketing it, doing whatever they want, and then a few months later, the bank shows up at my door, who I now own the property, saying like, you're out, you haven't paid us your mortgage, and you're like, no, I have been. Because I've been paying the guy, and the guy's like, well, I'm not going to pay for it. Like, why do I have to? So this definitely sounds like something that you would want to have
a lawyer
look at it, make
because
sure
you definitely want those
sides are
contingencies.
protected.
You want those contingencies in place. You want that if X happens, this is what happens next, right? You want all of that sorted out before something like that crazy happens, right? So yeah, definitely, you definitely want a lawyer involved in that. But yeah, any final questions before we get on to segment 3? All right.
No, and that's called subject to.
Yes, sub 2 or subject to. Yeah, that's what it's called. Very very interesting, very exciting thing. Unfortunately, we have to do stuff like this because interest rates are so high. It would be nice just to.
And housing prices are so high too.
Housing prices are so high too. Yeah, and it's tough to get a loan too. You know, the debt to income ratio, 2 years work experience, credit score, all that, right? You're bypassing all that in a sense. So yeah,
I always like to say before we move on to the third subject, don't just listen to what Dominic and I say on the podcast and just take it as law. You always need to do your own research. So go ahead, Google subject to, look a little bit deeper, see if it's right for you. We're always trying to bring nuance to the conversation. That's why I like that Dominic brought up that there have been things that go wrong with this. So it's important that you look into it and see if it's right for you. Just because it's worked for other people, and we know that's worked for other people, it doesn't mean that's going to work for you in your situation. So you need to do more research. Don't just listen to anybody. Including myself, including Dominic. Don't just listen to us because we happen to say something. You have to do your own research and see if it applies to you. We're always going to try to bring as much nuance as we can and tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. But just because you heard one of those, the good, the bad, or the ugly, that doesn't mean that's definitive. You have to figure out if it's going to work for you yourself. You have to be the hero of your own story.
Absolutely. And if you took action and started calling realtors and got a house under contract just from this one podcast, I would say, first of all, you're moving quick, and I can respect that. That's great. But it's important to also have more information, right? Don't just have all your information from one place. Get it from everything. Get it from people who are pro sub 2, from anti sub 2. Get it from every angle. So yeah, I definitely agree with what Chris is saying. Always, always, always do your own research. Get some books on it. Get some more knowledge on it. talk to lawyers, talk to real estate agents, talk to investors who have actually done it if you can find them. And yeah, it's definitely pro tip to bring talk to more people you can talk to, the better.
Yeah. And I always like to look for contradictory ideas, like you said there. Look for people who say like Project 2 is the bee's knees, always go for it. And also look for people who say like Project 2 is a scam, because
Yeah.
the truth lies somewhere in the middle. So
Yeah.
if you go ahead and you look at both those people, you look at those two extremes and say, this is right for me or not right for me, and whatever way you're leaning towards, you're probably right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not for everybody. You know, there's nothing wrong with getting a hard money loan from Bank of America, right? There's nothing wrong with getting from Citibank. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. If that's the path you want to go down, all power to you. You know, it's just about providing options, right? And providing ideas, right? We can't act on things we don't know of. So this is just kind of exposing you to a different way of getting into a home, right?
Yeah. More
So
knowledge in the tank.
more knowledge in the tank, and we love tanks. Anyway, segment 3. This will be our third and final segment. This is creative financing. I'm going to try my best not to confuse it with subject 2. I'm going to try my best. So they're very similar, right? They're very similar, but let's get right into it. So definition: utilizing non-traditional financing methods to acquire property. Importance: provides flexibility and allows more deals and reduces the need for large cash reserves. So the seller acts as the lender, allowing you to make payments directly to them instead of the bank, right? So in the last method, this is where they differ. Now that we know, this is where they differ. So in the last method, you are paying the bank. In this method, you are paying the seller, and the seller is paying the bank. So the benefits include flexible terms, lower closing costs, and faster transactions, right? So an example would be a seller is offering a finance of 80% of the purchase price at a competitive interest rate, right? 4%, we'll say. While you only need to bring 20% down, right? So simple as that. A seller is offering financing of 80%. The seller is financing the house for me up to 80%, and I'm going to bring 20% of the purchase price to the deal, right? As a down payment. It's basically, to make it simpler, the concept is very similar to like a rent to own, right? It's very similar. If you want to change how you think of it, rather than creative financing, it's more of a rent to own, right? So you're paying the seller, right? They're going to be financing 80% of the loan. You're bringing 20% down. And over time, you're paying him, and he's paying the mortgage, obviously. And, you know, this involves very little people. And we like that. The less people, the better, right? Let's see. Let me check my notes real quick. Yeah, okay. So I was correct on that. So part of the rent payments may be credited towards the purchase price, and he may pocket some of the rest, right? So you can do a few different things. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a balloon payment. Have you ever heard of that?
I have. But
Okay.
can you explain it to us?
Yeah. So basically a balloon payment is, say I get a loan, we're just gonna make super simple numbers, $100,000, right? $100,000 with a 6-year balloon payment. We'll just stick with 6 years, right? So for the 6 years, I'm paying my mortgage. At the end of 6 years, what happens? I have to pay off the remaining amount of the debt. It's a balloon payment, one giant payment, right? You're often going to see this in creative financing, because if I'm a homeowner, right, and I'm selling my home and it's creative financing, I don't want to be paying this forever, right? I want to get my money out of the deal. So I might do, you know, like we said, I'll finance 80%. You give me 20% of the purchase price. I'll give you favorable rates. At the end of 5-6 years, I want a balloon payment for the rest of the amount of the loan. Okay. So whatever is less. And that's something that you can amortize and figure out like what the actual number will be when that time comes. It's not just like a random.
And you need to save that additional amount in a separate account in order to pay that lump sum payment off in that year.
Or hopefully by that time, loans have become favorable. I don't know what 7 years will look like, but I hope they're less than 7%. I don't know. But the loan amount would be a lot less than what you would obviously pay before. So let me get through my notes. So you lease a property for 2 years with the option to buy. at a pre-agreed price, giving you time to improve your credit score and secure financing. So it's kind of another example of how this could be a good option. Let's see. But
So
yeah, I
earlier you
mean,
talked about
mhm.
you come in and the person's going to finance the 80%. You're going to come in with the lump sum of the 20%. Is that 20% going directly to the seller in order to basically say, like, let me inside the house? Like that's kind of your, as it were, like, here's my fee to play the game. Like, let me into the house, and now you leave, and now I'm going to start paying you basically what is rent, but you're paying them the mortgage plus a little bit more that they get to pocket.
Mhm.
And then obviously, if they have a 30-year mortgage, they don't want to be in this agreement with some random guy who showed up at their house for 30 years. So they're going to say, we're going to do this balloon payment for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, whatever amount of years they want. You're going to pay them every single month as if you're paying rent. And then at the end of it, whatever that agreement is, you have to pay the remaining balance that's remaining. Is there typically interest built on top of that, on top of the 4% interest that they already have? Would they put an like additional interest payment on there to make themselves a little bit more whole for the risk they're taking on?
Yeah, so the 20% would be they would pocket that, right? That would be their incentive to take a deal like this. And you're probably thinking, why the heck would I give 20%? Because you're going to pay, like we talked about, that 4 extra percent from going from 4% mortgage to 7% mortgage, right? We're talking about two, maybe two and a half, even 3 times more on the mortgage. So you're saving a lot of money in the long run. So yeah, they would be pocketing that, just to show that, hey, I mean business. This is what I'm serious. We draw up the contract. Here's the contract. Here's the terms. Everything included in that. But yeah, this is becoming a very popular thing in the real estate community, is the creative financing, because it's just so difficult to get loans these days.
Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, I guess out of the three that we just talked about, the creative, the subject to, or the house hacking, if you were, say you're younger, Dom, you're
Mhm.
right out of college, 20
Yeah,
years old, whatever age you graduated,
yeah.
which one of we're in this time right now, what option of these three would you choose, and why would you choose that option?
It's tough. It all depends. A lot of it depends on the buyer. A lot of it depends on the seller too. I think the easiest one, obviously, is the house hacking, right? If you already have a property, I know me, like I'm in a house right now. Chris, you're in a house right now. You could easily sublet out two of your rooms, right? And make some money. Obviously, you're not going to do that. You love your space. You love your peace. You don't like strangers in your house. House hacking is definitely the easiest one. The easiest one. If you can find some reliable friends to get it done, then that'll work, right? What I would do is I would pocket that extra money that you're making from house hacking, and then I would go and use that as a 4.5, 3.5% down on a fourplex, right? Remember, with the FHA, you can do the 3.5, 4.5% down as I think it's a first time home buyer, but I think I'm not sure if it's every loan you can do 3.5 to 4.5% down, or if it's just the first time home buyer. I'll have to look on that and I'll clarify on Friday. But I would take the profit from the house hacking, and then I would do it with the fourplex, and then I would house hack there again, and I would rent out the other the other 3 units. I would live in one of the units, because you have to live in one of the units. You can't just get a 3.5% down loan from the FHA and be like, yeah, I'm renting out all 4 units. Like, no. This is FHA is not an investor loan. It's for the family. It's a family loan. It's an American loan. So it's not for investors, but they do go all the way up until fourplexes, which I love. So I think that would be my strategy. House hack, save the money, then get myself into a fourplex. I'd rent out the other 3. You only have to stay there for a year before you can repeat the process, based on the rules of the FHA loan. And then you can go buy another fourplex with the profit that you made from that, and just keep repeating and repeating and repeating. Yeah, that's probably what I would do. And you could even, just because, option 1 is house hacking, option 2 is subject to, option 3 is creative financing. You can creatively finance your way into a house hack, right?
Yep.
You can subject to into a house hack, right? So you could get into a house with lower money down and better terms, and still house hack it, right? It doesn't mean the one or the other. You can still do both of them. Yeah, that's probably what I would do. And then once say, you did the house hacking, you bought a fourplex, stayed in it for a year, got another fourplex, right there. We're talking about, you got 8 doors, 8 units that's paying you rent, right? I don't know what the rent on that would be. All depends on your area. Sometimes it's $2,000 a month. Sometimes it's $200 a month. It really depends on your area. Maybe not 200, but you understand what I'm saying. maybe somewhere in like the backwoods of like Oklahoma in the Tornado Alley, you could probably get like that low. But yeah, that's kind of where I would do it. What do you have any questions on that, Chris? Any comments?
No, I think that sounds good. That was something that I was wondering is why not just do subject to or creative financing into a house hack? I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing the difference is if you do the house hacking, we can get the FHA loan, and now we're putting down 2 to 4%. I think it's 4%
Mhm.
in order to qualify for the loan. But with the subject to or with creative financing, we're going to need to have a substantially larger amount of down payment in order to basically sweeten the pot, as it were, to get the seller to agree to this.
Yep.
So I think it's really going to depend on the individual who is trying to do this, on us, the buyers, to say, do we have this money available? If I have a big amount of money available for a house, then yeah, maybe I can do subject to or creative financing. But if I don't have that available to me, it's probably not going to be the right game for you, because what I would try to caution our audience away from is, oh, well, I don't have the down payments. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take a personal loan or something like that in order to get the 20% in order to do this. Because now we're taking on risk from over here, risk from over here, and
Yep.
risk from over here. And we're hoping they all work out together.
Yep.
Where can it work? Yeah, leverage can work really, really well until it.
Yeah. Yeah. Leverage can break you. Leverage can definitely break you. Um,
And
yeah,
let's discuss what leverage is. Like,
yeah.
when you think about leverage, when you think about credit, those are fancy words for debt. It
Mhm.
is debt. You are financing or you are purchasing something with debt, and all debts must be repaid in the future. So if you take on debt to take on more debt, now you have double the debt, and they times each other in terms of destructive power.
Yeah, absolutely. They really do. They really do. So I don't want you to be afraid of debt, but I want you to be afraid of debt, if that makes sense, right? It can be good, it can be bad. You know, it's just like a knife, right? I can use it to make a beautiful meal. I can also use it to stab someone, right? So it's a double-edged sword. It can be great, it can be bad, right? Nobody would own a home without debt. Let's be honest, right? You couldn't for my house, like a regular house in Arizona, 300, 400,000, right? It's going to take me my entire life to save up $400,000. And by that time, the house is going to be 60 times more. You know, it's not going to work. So we love debt. You know, we love debt. It's the reason we get to be in a house, right? It's the reason for a lot of great things, right? But let's just not get out of control. Let's not get out of control. It's a
Yeah, I
very,
think
go
I
for
think
it.
the way to look at it is debt is a tool.
Yeah.
Debt is just a tool. And like you said, debt can be used as a good tool to make yourself work for it. Like a hammer can make you be a good tool, but a hammer can also be a bad tool. So you just need to use it wisely. Not all debt is bad, but most debt is bad if you're using it incorrectly. So you just have to be cautious of it, because it is like a knife in that, yes, you can use it to do a lot of good things for it, but it can also cut you very, very easily.
Yeah.
Like you
Yeah.
can screw it up real quick.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, guys, I hope you learned a lot. I hope you at least opened your mind to the possibility of different ideas of ways to get into a house. I know oftentimes, at least for my generation, there's a lot of complaining, a lot of whining going around talking about, you know, our parents, they had it so easy. They could buy a house for two times their salary, right? It was no problem, 2.5 times their salary. They had it easy, right? And now we can't buy a house. It's like, I get your struggle. I understand it. I know the numbers. They're daunting. They're scary. They're horrible. But there's still hope, right? There's still a lot of hope. So I hope this opened your eyes a little bit more. And today's action step, I just want you to go on Zillow. Just want you to check out different homes, not in your area, but in different states, to kind of see what kind of opportunities lie around, right? Oftentimes, we talked about this on the House Hacking Podcast episode. I don't remember which one it was. It was like in the 30s, I believe. We talked about geo arbitrage, right? Chris did that when he was younger. He lived in San Diego, very expensive, very high cost of living. He geo arbitraged. He took his family, he took his wife, his dogs, and his cat. They moved all the way over here to Arizona, and they got a much better deal, much more bang for their buck. And now they've built a wonderful life here. They've got jobs here. They've got everything they need here. So it might be time also to look in different areas. I know if you're looking in California, that those prices might be a little bit daunting. Here, even in Arizona, the house prices are quite daunting. So even I'm looking in different areas. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, and follow. And if you would like to leave some comments, feel free. Which of the three methods did you like best, and what do you think of them? And yeah, any final thoughts, Chris?
No, I would just say, I would preface I would tell our audience that as you go through life, like Dominic said, there's a lot of things that aren't fair. Like my parents and my grandparents were able to walk into a house, basically throw down 4 nickels and a raspberry, and now it's theirs.
Yeah.
Where for us, it's not, the average person's making $40,000 to $70,000. You would hope that you'd be able to pay off a house, but if a house starter home right now is 400 to $500,000, and if we're trying to save that amount to buy it, by the time we buy it, now it's $1 million, and we've worked for how many years to not even be able to afford half of the payment. I agree, it's not fair, but we need to deal with the way the world is rather than lamenting the way that it is. So, right now might not be the right time to purchase a house. You can look around. Please look at subject to, look at creative financing, look at house hacking. But if none of those options work for you, you always have the option of waiting. There's always the option to do absolutely nothing. Just keep on sitting there, hoard your money, be ready for that time, because only when the tide goes out do we see you swimming naked. And sometimes when you're swimming naked, that's where you can go out there. You can start to sell those people your swim trunks or whatever it is that you have in order to purchase from a distressed buyer rather than purchasing right now. In a few weeks, we're going, or I'm not sure, think about what John Grace talked about when he came on. Soon, there may very well be a large amount of homes on the market. We know the baby boomers own majority of the properties. And once they pass away, that's going to be inherited by their children. And their children are in their 50s and their 60s. If you were a 50 or 60-year-old, would you want to own a bunch of properties? Probably not. You'd want to sell those in order to finance your retirement. So all of economics is supply and demand. If right now there is not very much supply for a lot of demand for houses, eventually, and I'm not sure if this is going to happen, but I can definitely look at the statistics and see that it probably will happen. Once a bunch of people die and they start selling the house, it's going to invert. And now there's going to be a bunch of people trying to sell their houses and less people trying to purchase them, because when the baby boomers die, that's the largest generation, and they're going to all be gone simultaneously at or around. So you always have the power of time on your side. And the final thing I would say is, if you like thus this far, please tell a friend about the Fi Guys. Please bring a friend along for this road trip that we're on, trying to get to financial independence. The thing that Dominic and I are on here together, the reason we do this is because we're going together. It's not just me teaching Dominic. Dominic gets to teach me things too. I never knew about subject to until today. So I learned a new subject, and it's the second subject, which is pretty.
Well, yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, guys.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the host and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.